Welcome to Living Well with MS, the podcast from Overcoming MS, the world's leading multiple sclerosis healthy lifestyle charity, celebrating its 10th year of serving the MS community. I'm your host, Jeff Alex. The goal of our organisation and this podcast is to inform, support and empower people with MS to lead full and happy lives. We're excited you could join us for this new episode. Make sure to check out this episode's show notes for more information and useful links. You can find these on our website at overcomingms.org/podcast or on whichever podcast platform you use to tune into our programme. If you enjoy the show, please spread the word about us on your social media channels or leave a review wherever you tune into our podcast. Have questions or ideas to share? Email us at podcast@overcomingms.org, or you can reach out to me directly on Twitter at JeffAlex. We'd love to hear from you. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to Living Well with MS on your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. And now, let's meet our guest for this episode. Welcome to today's episode of the Living Well with MS podcast. On today's episode, I'm joined by Mathew Embry. Matthew Embry was diagnosed with MS in 1995 and is now living relapse-free, which he attributes to lifestyle modification following recommendations from his father, a research scientist. He created the documentary Living Proof, available worldwide on Amazon Prime, to discuss his life story. He also has the MS Hope website, which includes resources about his recommendations for lifestyle modification. Although there are some differences between the MS Hope approach and OMS, there are many more similarities. So, welcome to the Living Well with MS podcast, Mathew Embry.
Thank you for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
And for any of our listeners who aren't aware of who you are, and it is in the show notes about your documentary Living Proof on Amazon Prime, which I'd definitely recommend. But if they are unaware of you, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what your life and MS in your life as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, my name's Matthew. I live in Calgary in Canada. I'm 46 years old now. 45. Turning 46 this year.
Yeah, it's my birthday next week, and I'm 51 next week. So
yeah. And I was diagnosed with MS in 1995 when I was 19. And what I've done is, over the years and over the past decade, I guess, I've really tried to share my journey with people all over the world and how I've implemented, science-based nutritional and exercise and vitamin D and just different strategies to be able to control my MS. And, it's been really interesting because my job is I'm a filmmaker. That's what I do. I'm a director producer. So I've been able to integrate both my journey with multiple sclerosis and my craft as a filmmaker to be able to hopefully share information with people that will hopefully make their lives better.
And what would you say what's the main name of the approach? MS Hope approach, would you call it? I know you sort of the name of the diet, and you have to.
Yeah, well, the diet's actually called the Best Bet Diet, and that was created by my father, my dad, Ashton Embry. He's actually Dr. Ashton Embry, but he's not a medical doctor, but he's a research PhD. He created that diet back in 1995. And the diet you can find it on mshope.com. And mshope.com is kind of an outreach website. It's one that I tried my absolute best to distill the information to make it as easy for people as possible to learn about it and to be able to implement it into their lives.
So what would you say are the core principles then of your approach?
Yeah, so the core diet principles are dairy-free, gluten-free, low saturated fat, low sugar. We don't have beans in the diet either. Eggs are limited, and for sure we ask people, make sure people get their if they're allergic to eggs checked, things like that. And lots of vegetables, lean meats, fish, lots of fish if you can get it. And then we have a whole list of supplements, high dose vitamin D, and then regular vigorous exercise is part of the program.
Okay, so I think there is a lot of overlap between between the diet and the whole MS Hope approach and overcoming MS, certainly there's huge. And I would say to people who are new to these programs, I think those overlaps, and I hope you'd agree, those overlaps, things like dairy, they're the big hitters, really. Well, exercise is one. You really, and that's a classic thing. My father who had MS. He was told not to exercise, so the approach has drastically changed. I'm trying to think of other things because there's so many overlaps, really, and the diet's quite similar: low saturated fat, no processed food, definitely no dairy, vitamin D's in both of them, exercise both of them. What's your thoughts on smoking? That's one that didn't come.
No, no, not at all. Smoking's not.
I kind of assumed that because it's just bad for you. Yeah. But you don't mention that. Overcoming MS, they do say no smoking straight away. It's definitely not just on the fact that it's a really bad idea for everyone, but actually specifically for people with MS. So, what does a typical Mathew Embry day look like?
Well, it's I get asked that question quite a bit, and it's, I don't want to come across like it's boring, but it's certainly routine, right? And I think, I've got 2 children, I've got 2 dogs, and I manage a career as well. And, for me, I try to, it's a very routine. I get up, I have a breakfast that's in line with the best bet diet. And then, 90% plus of the time I exercise right away. And if you get a hold of me and if you want to work with me, you'll often get an email from me saying, well, I'll meet you after 10:30, or I'm available after 10:30 in the morning. Because that time for me is work too. It's getting to the gym, it's doing runs, it's getting some activity in. It's a huge part of my process. It's major, and it's somewhat non-negotiable. If I can't get that workout in the morning, sometimes you'll find me on the downstairs in our elliptical trainer at 10 o'clock at night. It's so fun. It's such part of the fundamentals of my program.
So it doesn't have to be morning. It's flexible around lifestyle.
It is. And I really try to share with people. If you follow me on social media, things like that, I try to share with people how to do that, because it's not easy to be able to find that time. So I try to share tips and strategies that I've learned to be able to make that time daily. And that's about eliminating things in your life, but it's also, to be able to add it, because that can be really hard for people. And then the remainder of my day is, like most other people, I work, I have to do my job. I have to have my responsibilities with my family responsibilities. I try to make time for prayer and meditation. These mindful pieces, and that can be walking too, but definitely time to be in my own head. And training that mind to control negative thoughts, which is, that is not an easy process.
Yeah, this is going out. I mean, we're recording this a few weeks before it actually goes out, but we're right in the middle of the Ukraine war, really. Which, I mean, especially over here, it's very easy to start doom scrolling through news. And that's another thing. It's a core part of OMS. One of the pillars is meditation and mindfulness, which you just touched on there. But I know that's not really mentioned. But would you say that's an important aspect of whether that be traditional mindfulness or meditation, like audio, or it could be prayer? You mentioned it could be. I mean, I think walking. Why we say mindfulness rather than meditation, I think is you can be mindfully walking. You can be mindfully riding your bike.
I agree.
You don't have to. You don't have to be sitting there with your fingers in the right pose and doing some yoga mantra. It's,
I totally agree with you, and I think that those practices are really personal. I mean, I don't think that I don't feel like I should, that I have the right or anything to tell someone how to do that. I just think that there's a lot of ways that you can access that. It's tough because you have to make the time, right? So once you make the time, then it's about implementing a practice. And I agree with you, going for a long walk in nature, or even just, finding that space mentally to be able just to stop, try to tune out the negativity, and just, it's training the mind. And that's how I see it. I see it like it's a discipline thing. Diet's discipline, exercise is discipline, and the mindfulness is being disciplined with what thoughts you're going to entertain. and how you're going to learn to control those two streams, almost like the good and the bad thoughts coming at us that seem to be a little uncontrollable.
Yeah, I think it was someone, it might have been John Kabat-Zinn or someone like that, who said, if you can't find half an hour for mindfulness every day, you need to find an hour for mindfulness every day. Which I think is a pretty good quote. Yeah. So, talking about exercise then, you're sort of saying you exercise every day. I mean, I've seen things where they've said, actually, I mean, I've looked through loads of exercise programs, really just to sort of advise people. So I've tried to sort of dip into most of the big ones, whether that be the MS Gym, Gretchen Hawley, you know Gretchen, yeah. And Gretchen does a lot of stuff with us, and you know, a lot of those MS specific diets, exercise things, and some of them are very much like, like no more than 5 times a week. Some of them 7, some of them even down to 3, I think. But I think you sort of say every day you do some exercise. Is that right? Yeah, I do. And again, I'm not an expert or a doctor, so I'm not giving advice for people to do this. I don't want to come across like, like, you know, this is what I do, and I think that I share that journey where this is what I do every day. I try my best to exercise every single day, and I think people have posted on my thing, you know, you need a rest day, or, you know, you got to give your body a break. And I just don't buy that. I just don't, because there's been too many times in my history in the last 20 years where I've been, let's just say, fatigued, where I'm just super tired and mental, I get some brain fog. Well, if I would have taken a rest day, I would have sat down, but I have gone to the gym or gone for a run, and I feel 100% better afterwards. I've like restarted my day. And so I had to learn that in my process. But I mean, there's just too many times that's happened. But could you adapt what you do? So, I mean, so personally today, I have a weekly session with my, we have this neuroactive thing with, we have a neurophysio, and she does a weekly session with us. And it was quite a muscle workout. You know, I was doing a lot of deadlifts, and my legs are feeling it, definitely. Right. But then tomorrow I would be like, okay, tomorrow's going to be more of a cardio day. I'll probably go out on the bike. I'm not going to work the same muscles. I'm going to be looking at sure. Yeah, that makes different sense. Things. Yeah. Does that work? Is it like, okay, well, if I've done a lot of cardio today, I could do a lot of strength tomorrow, or or swimming or something different.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, I'm not an expert in this, but one thing I have learned over the years is I just kind of listen to my body. Mm-hmm. And my body will give me cues for what it almost wants to do. And I just kind of listen. I'm like, all right, you want to do this today? Let's go do this. So people will post, can you set up a regimented workout plan? I'm like, well, I can't really, because I don't really know what I'm going to do. Like, I know I'm going to the gym. I know I'm going out to nature. But once I get there, I kind of change it up. And that's also part of my process that I share, that sometimes that changing it up is an internal dialogue that's happening while I'm doing it. Right. And I think that's another part of the process where I get to the gym, like, I'm only going to be here for 20 minutes, but then 15 minutes in, I'm renegotiating with myself to go a little bit further. And and if I'm too structured, then I find I can't have that same, listening to what the body wants. But, I wouldn't overdo anything, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you're not going to injure yourself, but.
No.
And there was a guy in the UK, Scotland, I think, called Graham Aubrey, who was a cyclist, and he had the 1 hour record for a while. And and he was quite an interesting character because he made his own bikes, and they made really weird structured bikes, and they ended up banning all of those because you had to use a normal bike after eventually. But one of the things he said was that he would go out, he'd get fully in his cycling gear, and he'd go out, get on his bike, and be on the road before he'd allow himself to say that he ate too much to go cycling. He'd go through all the prep, so you wouldn't have that excuse of like, he'd be on his bike and then say, no, my legs are really sore, I really shouldn't be doing it, and I'll get off. But he had to make himself, even if he knew he was legs aching so much. And I thought, okay, I get that. You've kind of, and then once you take that first step, you're like, actually, it's nice, it's outside, and it's Or make yourself run in the rain. If it's raining, it's still going to go out running. Because once you do it, it's okay.
Once you do it, and the question is, that conversation is daily. And I also try to share with the people. I mean, I've been in this for over 20 years. Like I still get it. I get it. Yesterday morning I wake up and it was minus whatever here in Canada. I don't want to run outside. Right. But as soon as I get going, then I'm like, let's go.
Yeah. And so one of the things I've seen, like sort of hashtags and things, and they're saying you have is no cheat days. So does that apply? Is that for everything, or is that for exercise, for diet? So what do you mean by when I say hashtag no cheat days, what does that mean?
Well, I mean, this is in response to so many people asking me if I've had a cheat day. I mean, that used to be one of the most often asked questions. So I'm like, well, no, I don't. And I think that's the part of this program is the vigilance and the discipline. And I try to really share that with people that, there's no kind of off switch here. Like let's say when it comes to dairy, there's been recent science that's come out to demonstrate, how problematic dairy could possibly be. Well, if you're going to have that once a week, I think that works out to about 15% of your life you're going to be having dairy. Well, don't expect to be at 100% if 15% of your life you're eating things that are, detrimental to you. So then, and if that's your level, if 85% is as high as you want to get, okay, then that's as high as you want to go, but you're only going down from there, in my opinion. So then the question is, okay, with no cheat days, well, every single day is an opportunity to reach and pursue optimal health. And it's up to you as each choice comes in, each meal you have, each time you exercise, each opportunity you take to be positive and do these types of things, how high you want to take your life.
And how would you measure progress for people? So let's say specifically with exercise, how would you measure someone's progress? Because we're not typical of the general population. I've got MS, you've got MS. So how do you measure your progress with exercise? Because I've come from a background where I ran, I did marathons, I did a lot of sports and stuff, and my kids are crazily sporty. So it's all about times, it's all about distances, all about weights. But how do you measure progress now?
For me, it's incremental, and I try to share that with people. I mean, I'm doing things too that are quite, whatever that means at a level where they're competitive. But for me, it's still incremental shifts. So if someone's got, struggling with disabilities, like, okay, can you walk to the end of your driveway today? Well, then can you walk to the end of your driveway plus a little bit down the block and get back? And it's like, you've got to be able to find those. And I think your point to find those measurables is really important, because how else do you know if you're getting better? Mm-hmm. Right? I don't know. Yeah. So in someone's journey, maybe it's walking around the block in 1 year is a big thing. Well, that's fantastic. That's the goal. Measure every single day how you're going to get there. And also that's one thing I talk about too, is hard accounting. And that hard accounting is when do you decide to do that? Are you going to do that weekly? Are you going to do that monthly? Where you're just accounting for your time and you're holding yourself accountable for what you've done. So for me, it's a little bit of a blur right now, because it's races that I'm going for. I'm trying to achieve, but I'm still trying to figure out, can I do this? Can I do that? What is this going to take? And then trying to measure how I feel almost on a daily basis. Yeah.
I mean, I think like a smartwatch is quite a handy thing to have, because that's the thing I use. I'm like, okay, I've got to do like as many steps as I did yesterday. Try and just because I know, I'm not going to increase it. If I increased it by 1,000 steps every day, then before I knew it, I'd be running constantly. But if I could just get, just that's my benchmark of just like, okay, just a little bit further. If we could just get a little bit further.
Yeah.
Because I mean, and we're middle-aged men, so ultimately we're not maybe at our athletic peak. So there's, I know I'm not going to hit, the physical things that I did before I had MS, and certainly when I was 20. But if I'm improving a little bit each time.
Yeah, but you're bringing up a really interesting idea that I've been giving a lot of thought to lately about sports systems. Because you said something interesting in just what you said. You said, I'm not at the peak of my life. Well, you're not at the peak of your life in regards to where you were in a current system, in a certain system. So when you were 25, that may have been peak athleticism for you for 25 to say 28-year-olds. Mm-hmm. Okay, but at 50 or 45, whatever I am, what's peak athleticism at where I should be?
Yeah, it's
right?
a very good point. Yeah.
And I think it's about where our society and globally maybe has gone wrong is we stop. Like once you're through college sports and like maybe you played semi-pro or something or whatever the case, then it's just like, well, that's as far as you go. And like, that's the peak. Well, for me, I redefine that where I'm like, no. I need to find out where my peak is now at 45 and how am I competing there? Because no one cares what I did yesterday, but people still care what I do today. Mm-hmm. So am I still at the peak or am I finding the peak of where I should be today?
That's a really good way. Yeah, a good way of looking at it, I think. Because a lot of people, I think, who are not necessarily diagnosed, but certainly coming around to lifestyle modification. A lot of the people I come across are in that age range of certainly 30s, 40s, 50s. And so, yeah, maybe they shouldn't be judging. And it's very difficult to judge yourself against who you were before. Before totally. I had MS, it's like it's quite like right? my balance is a bit shot now, so it's like I'm not going to be doing some of the things I was doing then. So, but yeah, I'm a nearly 51-year-old guy with MS. So if I'm doing well for that,
yeah, exactly.
Good.
Yeah, I get it.
And what would you say is the best type of exercise for people with MS?
Well, this is a good question. I mean, I actually met Dr. Jelinek in Australia years ago. It was one of the peak experiences of my life, probably. He's such a hero to me, and we were able to talk. And he says something that really stuck with me. He said the two words, vigorous exercise, and I was like, that's it. That's exactly it. Like that's what I've been doing. It's vigorous, right? And it's getting the blood flow, and so the question becomes like, okay, well, then. It doesn't really matter what you do as long as it's vigorous, as long as you're getting the blood flowing and you're getting that, like the porosity out of the brain, whether that be the blood or I don't know how the lymph system works, but all those types of things are just kind of flow, like the blood flow. So that's where I share with people that, and when I do Q&As, I'm like, I don't care what you do, just do something.
Mm-hmm. But you're actually, when you say that blood flow, you're getting out of breath. You're getting like,
yeah, I'm getting under breath. I'm sweating. I'm turning red.
Yeah.
I'm doing all those things. And that's what I remember Dr. Jelinek said that he did too. And it made total sense to me. I'm like, that's what I've been doing as well.
He also lives near to an outdoor swimming pool, which I'm really jealous of. But
yeah, right.
Yeah, if I had a 50-meter outdoor swimming pool and lived in a country which was warm enough to use it every day, that'd be fantastic. So I think that's a key point there. So it's really that sort of getting out of breath, not just like doing bicep curls and getting big guns is not necessarily going to do everything for your health in that respect. Then
I don't know. I mean, I can't necessarily speak to that because that's not what I've done. Mm-hmm. It's been 26 years now of vigorous exercise. And whether that's running, swimming, sports, all sorts of different things. And I think that blood flow component has been major for me. And I think if you are lifting weights and you're doing that thing and you are getting the blood flow, then maybe that does it too. But I just don't know. And I think I've also looked online and seen like apparatuses that they're creating to create that type of blood flow for people who maybe can't stand up. They pump the legs and they pump the arms. They just get to get that blood flowing. And I'm really interested in that for people. And I just think that blood flow and that circulation is just so important for good health.
So that comes on to a point I was going to make with people with mobility problems. So what would you suggest if someone's, maybe they're in a wheelchair, maybe they're bedbound, can they still do exercise in that way?
That's a tough question. I mean, I think that's where experts like Dr. Gretchen Howley come in, where they can offer people solutions to that. And then again, I also look at these other apparatuses or these medical devices. Like, can these be? I don't know if they're helpful, but why shouldn't? I think we should look at them. And if they are creating additional blood flow for people who are really immobile, then that seems really important. But the one thing I do share over and over too is just do what you can. Whatever stage you're in, you just, from my perspective, you got to keep moving.
Yeah, there was, I can't remember, it was one of the MS exercise specialists was just showing that people could do essentially running in a chair, doing the upper body bit of running. They can get really out of breath. And equally, there's a guy I interviewed, Mark Webb, who he plays wheelchair rugby.
Right.
And I think, he's not got the balance and anything to use, for his legs, but that looks like a pretty full-on workout. And it mentions something else that I've seen you bring up as well about team sports. So what do you think the benefit of team sports is?
Well, I mean, I think, again, that's a complicated question. I think that there's, like for team sports, I mean, I think it's so important to learn how to get along with people. That's one thing for sure. The other aspect is I think it holds you accountable. And I think that's also important in this journey. Mm-hmm. The accountability for me is, literally looking at myself, but I also, just because I've gone public, I'm now accountable to all these people. Yeah. So, if I say no cheat days, well, I better live it. And, if I haven't worked out, whatever the case, then I have a sense of accountability. And then also too, I think for people, I mean, the one thing with people I worry about sometimes with MS is they may feel because I have MS, I can't participate at a certain level. And that's where I think a team sport could be really important, where, you go swim with people who don't have MS or don't talk about this type of stuff. Well, that's good too. Like, I think that's all really great to integrate it, to be able to integrate it to other populations and not feel less than or those types of things that I think sometimes people can struggle with. Maybe I've at times wondered, And how about actually? That's not true. I've always been pretty. I have MS. I'm coming for you.
And how about if people have heat issues? Do you have anything to deal with that side of things? Because I think it goes both ways actually as well. Because I have heat issues in that I don't deal with heat well, like high temperatures well, since I've had MS. But I've been snowboarding a few times with MS, and I go snowboarding. Now, I don't have a whole load of thermal stuff on, like really quite limited amount compared to what I used to have when I was younger. Because when it's cold, I'm great. But when it's hot, much less so.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting.
And I found people the other way around. They go, oh, no, heat's great. I'm fine with heat, but no, in the cold, I'm terrible.
Yeah, I'm that. I'm that person.
You live in the wrong place.
Yeah, even before doing this interview, I had to go get a sweater because I'm like, I'm going to get cold here. And I've had to find ways to stay warm. And I think that it's no different than with the cooling. And it's interesting you bring it up because someone just wrote me they're going to send me a cooling vest. And for me, I don't necessarily need it, but I'm like, okay, great. But I actually thought maybe I'll go on social media and say who needs it, and then I'll give it away, and then see how they do. Like if they write me back and say this has been fantastic, maybe I'll send it to you, right? Like this has really helped me. Then go for it. And I think it's about finding environments that you're able to do it, like you said, in the snow. That sounds great. And it's about finding the gear. I mean, if you see me at the gym, I come in with a toque. I have another layer on. I wear these types of like wool shirts to the gym because I know I've got to be able to heat up. And once I can heat up, then I'm good to go. But getting there is challenging for me. But you can put me in a sauna for a long time, right? Oh,
see that? Yeah. I mean, it's funny, isn't it? I don't know if there's much research been done on this because it does seem to affect everyone with MS, but one way or the other. But I've literally, I've been in the sauna once since I've been diagnosed with MS.
Really?
And that was at Glastonbury Festival. There's Glastonbury's not so far from me, so I go quite a lot. And there's a sauna there, and it's a place where you can get a shower. Okay. Which is an important thing at Glastonbury Festival,
right?
But yeah, but it was terrible. I thought I'm not going to get out of here. This is so it was like I just couldn't walk.
Wow,
really. And then I basically laid down on the grass for about half an hour because I was just in a terrible state. But yeah, I just think be interesting if there's some research done. I'm sure maybe there is, but but just avoid it. Basically, is what you're saying. You want to go for warm, I'll go for cold, and we'll look at each other. I'll look through your outside window that I can see there in front of the nice cold outside.
Yeah, it's cold.
See, look the way you looked at that with worry, and I'd look at that as I quite fancy it. So one more exercise question. More weight or more reps, would you say, is good for you with exercise?
Well, this is just from a personal experience. I'm a rep kind of person. For me, it's all about reps. And I got weights downstairs, nothing more than 25 pounds. And I think that's been part of my process. Again, I'm not an expert in this, so maybe there's someone who knows more, but my process has been endurance running, low weight, high reps. And that's been, again, over 25 years now.
Because I was thinking this today because I was doing some, reasonable weight for me now. But I'm kind of still going with what I did when I was younger, which was sort of, let's start out with 3 sets of 8, then you do 3 sets of 10, then you do 3 sets of 12. Once you can do 3 sets of 12, you go up a weight. You go back 3 sets of 8.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
And I was doing that today, and I thought, I don't know if this is the best way of doing it. I don't know whether I should be actually, why am I stopping at 12? Where actually... Right. And is that because you seem to be? I've seen some exercise stuff with you, and you seem to be like actually almost like you're not really doing reps. You're like, actually, no, I'm going to do a lower weight, and I'm just going to keep doing it for a lot longer.
Keep doing it, yeah, for a lot longer. And I don't use things like weight benches and that type of stuff. I try to do a lot of balance exercises as well. Like I'm doing weights, I'm lifting my legs at the same time, and trying to figure out like not like jumping jacks, but like always moving.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So I don't really use those traditional machines either that much. And that's... I kind of see I see it like I have a really Paleolithic kind of perspective of my body. So I just think like, what would a cave person do? Mm-hmm. They lift a rock and what would they need to do?
And that applies to so many things as well, because vitamin D, we would have lived somewhere sunny, and we might have worn a rabbit pelt around our waist or something. We'd have got loads of vitamin D. We wouldn't have had dairy because we didn't have a farm full of cows, let alone cheese or anything like that. Yeah. We just ate what we could find, and we did loads of exercise. We got loads of vitamin D. Mm-hmm. We ate natural food that we could forage and find, and basically, we're almost saying, I mean, I don't, there's paleo is sort of like almost tagline now, isn't it? And that's not necessarily, sometimes you think, really, did they actually eat that? Like bulletproof coffees and things. But yeah, if you sort of think, it does make sense. A lot of that stuff, that's kind of how we're made, isn't it? It's really interesting to speak to you. I think there's a lot of stuff. There's certainly... I mean, I don't like this idea of like overcoming MS or MS Hope being like in competition, because I've certainly heard that sort of thing in the past. I just think we need to look at the overlaps between all these things, and there's so many similarities. And in fact, the more I speak to you, some of the things which maybe that are not necessarily highlighted by your website, like don't smoke, do something mindful, and all those things like vitamin D we mentioned, exercise, whole food diet. Is I just think, for everyone, really. So could I ask you one last question, though? It's something we often ask people. If someone's newly diagnosed with MS, what would be your key best piece of advice to them?
Change their diet right now.
And go... are you right now? Full on, like you have to do it 100%?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Because I think that it's... I mean, I don't want to get too kind of out there, but illness is, for me, like now I've had this for over 25 years. Okay. So I have a very different maybe perspective now, where it's, I almost see sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes illness can be a call to adventure, and it can change your whole journey for you to go, okay, here I am today, and here's where I want to go to opt towards optimal health. Well, going towards optimal health you're going to have to transform your life radically, because your life to that point got you there. Okay, got it. Now, what do I have to change to not have this outcome, which is illness or disease? And I think the key component to that, is nutrition. And that is very hard to shift. It's very hard to change.
And one of the things that George Jelinek says is like turning around an oil tanker as well. So it's not a quick fix. You're going to have to, like you're saying, start day one, because if you don't start turning the oil tanker, it's not going to turn. It's going to take a long time to turn it around. You need to keep it going in another direction. It's a difficult thing.
Yeah, and then I think that, but it can start right now. Like if you're listening to this podcast, you can go to your fridge and change. And that's where I try to tell people, it's you. You have the power to have an incredible transformation in your life right now. You just need to decide. And then I also tell people to find the outcomes you're looking for. Find the people who you look at and you think, hey, that's what I want to be. And then go learn what they did. And the thing is, people who normally, succeed in something, they want to tell you all about it because they've enjoyed it, right? And they enjoy where they are. And so why would you not want to share it? And so you're in luck. Not only can you find the person you want to aspire to, that person's very likely going to want to help you get there.
Okay, with that, thank you very much, Matt Embry, and I'd encourage everyone to have a look. The links are all on the show notes. Matthew is, I called you Matt again, sorry, I keep saying.
That's okay.
I called you Matt. So Matthew's all over social media. You'll find that links to all his different social media outlets. But yeah, check out the MS Hack website as well.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Living Well with MS. Please check out this episode's show notes at overcomingms.org/podcast. You'll find all sorts of useful links and bonus information there. Do you have questions about this episode or ideas about future ones? Email us at podcast@overcomingms.org. We'd love to hear from you. You can also subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. Living Well with MS is kindly supported by a grant from the Happy Charitable Trust. If you'd like to support the Overcoming MS charity and help keep our podcast advertising free, you can donate online at overcomingms.org/donate. To learn more about Overcoming MS and its array of free content and programs, including webinars, recipes, exercise guides, OMS circles, our global network of community support groups, and more, please visit our website at overcomingms.org. While you're there, don't forget to register for our monthly e-newsletter so you can stay informed about the podcast and other news and updates from Overcoming MS. Thanks again for tuning in, and see you next time. The Living Well with MS family of podcasts is for private, non-commercial use and exists to educate and inspire our community of listeners. We do not offer medical advice. For medical advice, please contact your doctor or other licensed healthcare professional. Our guests are carefully selected, but all opinions they express are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Overcoming MS charity, its affiliates, or staff.